Progress. All right, let's try this again. Thank you for having us. You've heard a lot from us over the past 2 days. What I'm going to talk through is very basically how the concept of designing and planning and operating, maintaining, and appealing to all ages and abilities of the population with your bicycling network has begun to mainstream itself in everything the Federal Highway is doing around bicycling. I don't think I have to necessarily explain what the concept means, but I'm going to try to through some pictures in the presentation. And as I told the crowd here in the room, we have so much going on around walking and bicycling these days at Federal Highway. It's stuff is coming out hour by hour. And so we had something kind of big come out just this morning. I have it and
That's a participant who's not on mute.
Yeah. And so I'm going to talk about it as much as I can from memory at the end, but it's pretty exciting news, I think, not to oversell it too much, but that is that's your enticement to stay till the end. Cursor. Okay. This is my daughter, Elizabeth. She is going to pop up throughout the presentation because she is very easy to release photo rights.
Did she release the photos?
Her parent and or guardian did. And also, more saliently, as somebody who's worked in bicycle planning and pedestrian planning for a while, I truly thought I sort of understood the concept of all ages, but you don't quite live it and feel it until you take a 6-year-old out on their 16-inch wheel bicycle, and there's a 15,000 car a day arterial running next to you, or even walking. You truly, it's like a traffic stress meter that's 48 inches tall. And full of input and thoughts and such. So this is just a little kind of side by side of exactly what I'm talking about. This is on the left, a bicycle lane, unprotected, curbside, a delivery truck up ahead. And right now, as I took this picture, it immediately precedes me doing the calculus of what I have to do, the instructions I have to yell out to said 6.5-year-old to keep her and I safe because the bike lane is obstructed. On the right, we are riding on a trail, and there's really not more you really need to say about that. It's super easy. You're not worried about cars there. A little bit sort of getting into the nitty-gritty of how we're sort of translating that at a top level into what we're doing at USDOT and Federal Highway. And then I'm going to start going through everything that we've done from sort of the way your community might approach bicycle planning, from plans to facility selection to design, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of our activities are structured around the goals and the actions that we identified. Back in 2016, we had this thing called the Strategic Agenda for Pedestrian and Bicycle Transportation. It identified 4 big goal areas around 4 things: networks, safety, equity, and trips. And you'll see this little gray circle on the right that sort of talks about those. It outlines actions that we took or promised to take in the areas of things like capacity building, technical assistance, policy, generating data, and doing research. It also suggested some goals of getting to 0 fatalities nationwide in 20 to 30 years and increasing the percentage of short trips represented by walking and biking by 50%. This has since, all of this has sort of been kind of superseded by a new USDOT strategic plan, which includes, you've probably heard a lot about the National Roadway Safety Strategy. that set a goal of 0 fatalities, but up on the screen, you see a goal that you might not have heard so much about, but is a pretty ambitious one. And what we're going to talk about a little bit is sort of our process and what we're planning to try to do to get to it. And that's to increase the percentage of trips by transit and active transportation from roughly 4% to 6%. Now, 4 to 6% doesn't sound very impressive, but that's 50% more. Like, that's a significant jump in the number of people who are participating in walking, bicycling, micromobility, and transit trips versus what they are now. It's a pretty big lift. And when you put it together with a goal of achieving 0 fatalities on the road, those need to not be in conflict. And I'll kind of highlight that a little bit later, but the strategic agenda itself is kind of like our roadmap within Federal Highway, within the Office of Human Environment, about what we're going to do, what types of funding opportunities we're going to try and take advantage of to advance critical research, to do technical assistance, to basically help everyone help us achieve this goal. Promoting the concept of facilities for all ages and abilities is going to be a part of how we get there. It's not the whole picture. I think all of us can say that, you know, there are reasons beyond traffic safety that we may or may not walk or ride a bicycle on a given day for a given trip. But for a lot of people, it's a significant part of that calculus.
And get rid of that little X that there. You should be able to X that out.
I should be able to.
Yes. There we go. Okay, good.
All right.
It's blocking the.
Anyway, a lot of Federal Highway's recent work in bicycle planning and design has aimed to get us to the point where we're accommodating people's level of comfort with interacting with drivers while on a bicycle. So last year we created this infographic on the right through social media. And the basic principle and the graphic is probably one that's familiar to a lot of you, that a lot more US residents want to ride a bike than they currently do, but just don't have access to facilities where they feel comfortable riding. And when we provide those facilities that we know through data are perceived by the majority of people as being safer, we know that more people end up riding. So that focus on user comfort is in big part thanks to a partnership that we've had for a number of years with the Royal Dutch Embassy, who is here at the Bike Summit. We've participated in a number of global knowledge exchanges with them, brought many of those best practices from the Netherlands into US practice. And the little report on the left is sort of a report out from that information exchange. Our office and our Office of Safety also participated in a recent information exchange with Australia and New Zealand. And so a lot of work is ongoing with that to try and bring in some lessons from those countries as well to address many of the safety aspects of arterial roadways for walking and bicycling. But what I'm going to cover over the next few sections is how this approach, planning and designing, assuming that if we provide a network that's safe, comfortable, and connected, that people of all ages and abilities are increasingly going to ride, has found its way into our guidance and technical assistance documents over the past few years. And where there's a notable headline, I'm going to try and pull that out for you. Back when I was in local practice, we would always pull out the road diet threshold. If you've heard this one, that any road under 20,000 might be a suitable candidate for road diets, and we'd put that in front of the community, and we'd have advocates putting it in front of us. We have lots of those sorts of great things in our documents, hidden in plain view within 90 pages of text that you may not have the time or inclination to read. So if there is a headline finding, I'm going to try and pull that out. And in the Q&A, if you're thinking, boy, I wish Federal Highway would say X, let's hear it. And I can tell you, either it depends, it's in this document, or we have it in Word, or whatever. I apologize. I'm having trouble getting these slides to advance. So we'll start with network planning. Considering networks and planning for walking and biking is critically important because we don't travel back and forth to one single place. And even if we did, the agencies that plan and design our streets and highways would never figure out what that one single place where everybody with our diverse wants, needs, and circumstances wants to go. So interstate planners, they didn't plan the Beltway inner loop independent of the outer loop. Nor did they even plan I-95 just as I-95 alone. There's an interstate highway system that connects the country. So at our community levels, our communities are made up of a wide range of people with a wide range of places they want and need to go, differing times of the day and differing needs for travel time and reliability. And planning succeeds when it provides a dense, safe, connected network to as many of those origins and destinations as possible. So the network approach to planning is critically important if we want that wide range of people of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities to use walking and bicycling more often. Where a network gap in the driving network, it may add some time, or you may have to go a little bit out of your way for a driver. A network gap for somebody walking or bicycling, it can put somebody in actual danger. Like there's actual physical danger. That's the stakes, or at least put them in a place where they don't want to be because they perceive a lack of safety. And we have plenty of research backing up the logic that if people feel unsafe, the vast majority of them simply are just going to choose another way to get where they need to go. So at USDOT, the benefits of more people walking or bicycling more often, such as helping mitigate climate change, provide the equity benefits of lower costs and personal costs of travel, and delivering public health benefits, mean that we are now promoting more walking and bicycling. We don't promote an approach to roadway safety that minimizes death and serious injury for people walking and bicycling by holding down rates of walking and bicycling. That is a negative outcome. If we achieve vision zero through zero walking and bicycling, that is a net negative. So what you're going to see throughout our contemporary materials on bike planning and design is an emphasis on designing so that all ages of riders are safe and feel safe on these growing networks in our communities. That's the bottom line, is get people riding more often. And this is really just yet again an excuse to use imagery from my hometown of Cambridge, Massachusetts. One of the first documents that we have, and the big headline on this one is the Guidebook for Measuring Multimodal Network Connectivity, which is a big title. And what it basically says is that if you are, and Gunnar is squinting at the graphic, everybody is squinting at the graphic, because what you see in that chart, it says, you know, you have a lot of variables about how you can define a network, how connected it is, how dense it is, how many redundant connections there are, all of these things that sort of are the physical attributes of what makes up a network. But across the columns, you see sort of when you introduce quality, that measure of who those facilities appeal to. That's when you begin to notice big differences in what a network looks like once you begin getting picky about who's actually going to use it. Along the left, sort of any network, any street where walking and bicycling is allowed, you might look at a given city and 80% of the streets are considered part of the network. Once you drill down to anything that has a specific walking and bicycling facility, like any bike lane, any sharrow, anything, you then see, okay, now it's like 25% of the network. And then once you get to sort of that quality measure where you are assessing just what's considered suitable for all ages and abilities, you could get down to an even smaller number. So introducing that concept of quality and what appeals to people is a critical thing in considering networks. So we did a series of pilot projects for grantees to basically put the processes and approaches from that guidebook into practice. The projects themselves, they made use of a variety of different tools to answer a variety of planning questions. These were about both walking and bicycling. We got people together to sort of talk about the work, conduct some technical exchanges, documented that in a final report. If your community is sort of interested in looking into this approach to planning, it's one that I would definitely encourage you to take a look at this pilot project, the outcomes of that. It's I think one of the big takeaways from that is that data is very important. Having even just basic data about what is on your streets is critically important. The Small Town and Rural Multimodal Networks Guide, it's a very popular resource we have. It's basically sort of it's taking a lot of these concepts and advancing kind of a vision of how that might look in a rural and small town context. It's sort of a bridge between existing guidance and trying to encourage bringing the innovation in current guidance into that rural context. We focus quite a bit in walking bicycling planning, quite a bit on cities, both because of the high numbers of people bicycling or walking there, but because of the potential for growth as well. We're focusing increasingly on the suburbs and exurbs because of the growing safety crisis on these big, large signalized arterials in those contexts, and because of the increasing displacement of underserved populations to those contexts. However, we felt that both the safety of people walking and bicycling in rural and small towns and the potential for increased activity in those contexts warranted that focused look. This is kind of like a diagram that sort of advances a vision of what that looks like. Is sort of the small towns have a great potential for providing walking, bicycling within their cores and facilities that may connect them, sort of as spines, I guess we'll use the term to tease a concept we'll introduce later, and connect individual communities across rural contexts. Equity is often talked about quite a bit, especially in walking bicycling, because of not only the growing safety crisis that we need to solve, but for those of us who are seeking to change the built environment, we're grappling with the past failures of top-down planning and its racist outcomes in freeways that destroy communities of color. You've heard a lot about reconnecting communities, the grants that seek to try to begin remediating those past harms. Some of the just recent resources we have to help facilitate better outcomes. I wanted to highlight the work of PBIC. PBIC is hosted through the University of North Carolina and are funded in a cooperative agreement by Federal Highway. They have quite a bit on equity and are going to be doing a lot more in our new grant agreement, thanks to some new partnerships within that cooperative agreement. More to come on that. And through USDOT, you can expect us to be doing a lot through our equity action plan, which lays out a number of discrete actions that USDOT is taking, including the Justice 40 initiative, which seeks for 40% of the benefit of federal investments to accrue to historically underserved communities. I want to move now from sort of that network planning level to facility planning, which is kind of the process of selecting a bikeway type for a given corridor that's appropriate to the context and to deliver that link in the network that will welcome people of all ages and abilities with a facility that is safe and feels safe. So I don't know how many of you have seen this from a document called the Bikeway Selection Guide. The big headline to take out of this is that if you have a road where drivers are going around 25 to 30 miles an hour, and there's around 6,000 to 7,000 trips a day on that road, your planner, engineer, whoever should be considering some form of separated bicycling facility in order to be a facility that may appeal to people who want to ride a bike of all ages and abilities. It's basically, that's what this guide does, is try to guide practitioners through the decision process of what type of bikeway is appropriate to the context. This chart here is for an urban context. There's a corresponding one for rural that recognizes that you may not have a whole lot of walking or bicycling activity on a rural connection, but by providing sufficient shoulder widths, you can bring a level of comfort to rural travel, just like you do to urbanized areas. Once you've sort of turned that corner from selection to design, going forward and actually designing the facility, the devil is in the details. For higher speed roads, we know higher volume roads providing physical protection between riders and motor vehicles, or eliminating motor vehicles altogether from a street, is a complicated design process. So again, just an excuse to show more pictures of my daughter on two separated facilities. One is what we would consider a sort of a capital project type facility. The other, a quick build with flex posts and markings. Our separated bike lane planning and design guide, it dates back to 2015, and it was another outcome of our continuing exchange with the Netherlands, and it provided not only this sort of 4-step design framework, but some design guidance for practitioners to use in design. This, along with a lot of other design guides that have come along, like the NACTO Urban Bikeways design guide, have helped to mainstream separated bike lanes as the preferred bike lane design guide for many contexts. So 7 years removed from this now, we're now moving into certain new frontiers of design guidance. States like Massachusetts, Ohio, Minnesota, and others are writing and adopting really cutting edge bikeway design and planning guidance that bring in concepts like protected intersections. NACTO is currently working on a new urban bikeway design guide. And I'll mention the AASHTO bike guide in a few slides. And I just want to shout out to my friends at USDOT. That is the L Street Northwest protected bike lane that is 3 blocks west of here on the cover. Trails. We focus a lot on street bikeways in this presentation in part because that's my job, and in part because streets are predominantly the form of public right-of-way that people are using to get to and from most places, and keeping people and drivers and people on bikes from colliding is a really urgent and difficult problem. But trails on an independent right-of-way can play a really special role in a bicycling network for all ages and abilities. Motor vehicles and the perception of traffic safety are no longer the primary concern, except maybe at crossings. And safety outcomes can live comfortably alongside aesthetics, comfort, and the whole user experience as areas for planners and designers to focus on, because our facility is purpose-built to serve people who are walking and bicycling, like my daughter and her grandmother shown there. Many trails, as shown previously in our publication about small town and rural contexts, are connectors in a network. They sort of connect between places, but increasingly trails are important links in networks to enhance safe and comfortable access within places. So we released a guide on rails with trails that covered some benefits and case studies for including trails alongside active railways. And we released an information brief through PBIC that discusses this role of trails in non-motorized networks. I'm lucky enough to live in a place that had right-of-way or a trail that cuts through and connects my community. Everybody back in Cambridge and Somerville, Massachusetts, were eagerly awaiting the official opening of the extension of something called the Somerville Community Path, which is going to complete the connection of the very famous Minuteman Trail all the way through the east-west length of Cambridge and Somerville into the heart of Cambridge. And here in DC, I was lucky enough to work a little bit on the Metropolitan Branch Trail, which is going to very close to completing a long ago vision of a low stress complete connection from downtown Silver Spring all the way down to the Capitol building. So these connections are incredible. You only have to go up the Met Branch Trail and see the sorts of development that is coming into the trail alongside it, and creating this whole new, just basically community alongside it. It's incredible. A plug for a design course that we have through something called our National Highway Institute. It's a web-based training that goes over so much of this in detail. I won't cover the specifics of it, but just Google NHI course 142-080 and you'll find it. A big challenge, I think, in bicycling networks is communicating to the user what exactly they are. If you've ever looked at a bike map and just tried to figure out like, what would I be comfortable riding, and trying to communicate that in a map is a very tricky challenge, deceptively tricky. So this is an old resource that tries to sort of tackle that. And another couple of really recent resources that I kind of love. One has the has a title that traffic analysis and intersection considerations to inform bikeway selection. The headline that you want to pull out of this document is that the Federal Highway says we do not have regulatory standards for level of service. You've heard of level of service. We don't have any standards for that on the national highway system. And this guide basically says if you're designing for safety and you're designing for all ages for a bikeway at an intersection, you shouldn't be solely thinking about level of service. You should be thinking about the safety of users, the comfort, and furthermore, looking into the future, forecasted level of service. So how much traffic or delay there might be 20 years from now after you build it shouldn't necessarily be your foremost concern either. To balance according to your community values, goals, what is appropriate for your project, the goals you want to achieve. Similarly, a guide on-street motor vehicle parking and bikeway selection process basically says, parking is valuable. People want, and in many cases, need curbside access, but that has to be balanced against real safety considerations. When you're talking about a busy urban area with a lot of curbside and you have an unprotected bike lane, you do have to sort of weigh the safety implications of not, say, protecting a bike lane against the provision of curbside access. Just a recent picture of a variety of other resources, all available to download, all free, obviously. Our Head Bike Information Center, please go there. They not only are promoting most of our recent stuff, but produce a great variety of resources on their own, produce a great webinar series that we rely on. I wanted to talk briefly about some new programs to implement networks. ATIP, the Active Transportation Infrastructure Investment Program, is an exciting new program that got appropriated $45 million and will fund planning and implementation of walking and bicycling networks. That differs from a lot of the federal highway programs you hear about, because it's about a network. It's about what your community looks like and the package of projects that will create a community that's safe, connected, and comfortable. We're working on it now. The goal is to have something out in fiscal year 23 in terms of a notice of funding opportunity for communities to be able to propose on it. There are both planning and capital implementation grants that are going to be available. The planning grants by statute have to be for a planning project that's $100,000 or more. Capital projects, the total project value of each capital project has to be $15 million or more. So these are the capital part of that is a big, these are big. And so we have to sort of think about how $45 million, how far that goes. But the planning aspect of it, planning is important, obviously. You've heard from a few speakers, and I heard it, I wrote it down on a sticky note when Pete Buttigieg said it once, that funding follows plans. Pete Benjamin said something similar, speaker in our planning workshop said something similar. When you put something on a plan, that funding will follow it somehow. And so getting network planning for your all ages bicycling networks or your accessible walking networks or whatever it may be, getting those plans in place is a necessary precondition in many cases to accessing the funding to actually build it. And to that end, there's such a wide variety of funding sources available for folks to build out, whether it's an all ages network or whatever it may be related to active transportation. SS4A is a big one that has been talked about here, available to locals, regions, tribes, et cetera. They have $1 billion in grants to give out, and 40% of that, a huge chunk of that, is for planning, data gathering, doing all of the analysis necessary, especially for active transportation, to achieve Vision Zero. So there's a tremendous opportunity there. And with the eye chart that I know we've shown in other presentations about the funding opportunities and all the federal programs that can fund walking and bicycling, you see just a huge range of programs that can fund it. And if you take the approach of funding following planning, the funding is, we're certainly in an era where the funding is there. Some upcoming products that support this all ages and abilities approach. The one at the top I thought was upcoming, but it actually released today, and it's got a wonky name: Separated Bike Lanes Crash Modification Factor Study. Like, what the heck is that? This is kind of it was just a technical brief was just released today, and based on a study of 6 cities. Based on crash data and exposure data, so like how many people are actually bicycling on the networks in these 6 cities, they found that upgrading a traditional unprotected bike lane to a separated bike lane design would be expected to cut your crash risk in half. And that's additive because we already have studies showing that putting in a bike lane where there isn't one cuts your crash risk in half. So that means separated bike lanes are going to be much more, obviously the safety is number one. Safety impact is huge, but your ability to be more competitive for safety-oriented funding, whether it's HSIP or any other data-driven safety program. This is a study that just put the numbers in front of you that says, okay, you're separate, you upgrade a traditional bike lane, separate it, and you cut the crash risk in half. Like, that's kind of huge. So the final version of this presentation, will put the link to that tech brief in, but I'm very excited about that. We also have a guide underway for separated bike lanes on higher speed roadways, trying to profile places, whether states or cities, that have looked at these larger sort of higher speed arterials and seeing if there are safety or usability upgrades that we had by including separated bike lanes. And finally, the Ashford Bike Guide. This is going to be, it's going to be a very, very revolutionary step forward in bicycle design. It really is. It's been coming soon for years, but it is genuinely nearing the finish line. I've seen drafts and part of a volunteer committee that reviews it, and it is coming soon. Everyone is promising. So with that, we'll open it up to questions. I ran a little long, so I think we only have about 10 minutes, but why don't we, Christopher is scribbling away. Do you want me to take questions from the crowd first?
Let's do some questions from the crowd first. And you may have to repeat in. Anybody got a question? And if not, I have questions on the app.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just maybe an interesting question, because we're trying to get more people to ride bikes. So when we're designing, whether it's bike lane or bike paths, is there some way we can identify a way that will save time for people riding bikes rather than driving cars? And I say that because it's great that we want to get more people on bikes, but in order to get more people on bikes in the way of commuting, we have to provide a real benefit. And time today, time is an important benefit.
Yeah, and I could
Repeat the question.
Yes. So the question was, is there a way that we can provide a time savings with bicycle travel? Because time is obviously very valuable, and we're trying to find ways to get people riding bicycles. And I think I don't know if there's a conscious way that we can make that happen, unless you talk about purposely delaying people. We know that we want to control motor vehicle speed so that time savings of the automobile, that may be because you're going 50 miles an hour in a 35. And that's not legal. So controlling the speed through design of roadways is going to sort of narrow that time gap. We know that bicycling has very good travel time reliability. So a lot of times we talk about not only how long it takes to get somewhere, but what's the deviation of that? Like it's great if I can get somewhere in 20 minutes, but if I'm going to be delayed by 15 minutes, then I have to plan that. That goes into my planning factor. I want that to be reliable. And if you're driving, if you're taking the bus, you're sort of subject to the whims of whatever's going on. Whereas riding a bicycle, I know if a bike ride takes me 25 minutes, it takes me 25 minutes. And a lot of this, the data items to be able to sort of communicate that to people, having insight into where, say, common origins and destinations are and trying to find ways to connect them more directly for bicyclists, that comes through that network planning stuff that I was talking about before, the data stuff of knowing what your bike network looks like, where your common origins and destinations are, and where the opportunities are to do exactly that, to reduce, say, out of direction travel, to play with signal timing on a significant bicyclist corridor so that it favors them. There's a green wave for bicyclists rather than drivers. So a lot of that comes through that network approach of just sort of having a picture of where people need to go, how quickly they can get it.
I want to grab some of these off the Zoom. This, I think, is an easy one on the CMF thing you were talking about. The question was, is this simply separated or separated with a physical barrier?
It actually, there's a difference in the outcome between the two, but they separately categorize them, and I couldn't remember exactly. They are close to each other in terms of crash reduction.
So we will put that link
Yes.
in when we get it. I want to go.
And I will say it's just a technical brief that summarizes the result. The full paper, which is a big thing, is forthcoming. It's going to take quite a few weeks.
So question came in early. Can we scroll back because I can't read my own writing now. Way back. Okay. How can busy shared use paths be made safe for bicyclists? Doesn't say pedestrians, just says bicyclists. All ages and abilities. The collision risks with other path users are probably far greater than the risk from traffic on low traffic, low speed roadways.
I think I would, the question back to you and cite our trail LOS calculator, which is
Level of service.
Level of
service.
That is a tool that dates back to, I don't know how far, you tell me. It's a calculator that says if you have a certain number of bicyclists and a certain number of pedestrians, it gives you guidance on how wide your trail should be to try and reduce those conflicts between users on the trail.
Okay.
And the AASHTO bike guide actually includes that, the output of that resource, the trail LOS calculator, in sort of a table to sort of give you guidance, the bike guide of how wide trails should be to try and reduce those conflicts.
Okay. This young man here, and then
Related question, there's a news report last week that the transportation chief of Amsterdam is proposing to reduce electric bike speed on cycle paths to 12 miles an hour.
Wow.
And I wondered if you heard about that and you have any reaction or comment.
I did not hear about that. We did, our federal land highway colleagues did a safety study. Well, it wasn't just safety, it was sort of all issues related to bikes, to sort of look at the landscape of what's going on with them, what's the status of regulation, what are the challenges they pose to federal land operators. And the output of that study is there's just not a lot of data on sort of the safety impacts of them. We have a number of sort of case studies coming out, sort of looking at at e-bikes. I think right now it's sort of, it's kind of premature for us to say, you know, what's the safety impact, what's the right regulation. I will say that e-bikes now are ingrained in federal code in the sort of free class system. Yeah.
Study's coming out really soon.
Yes.
We hoped it would be out, but it got caught in public affairs issues, so. Right, next questions on the Federal Highway Administration strategic goals, on the goal for increasing share.
Yeah.
What is the year for that goal to be resolved or to be reached, rather? I can't read my own writing.
You know, so that's a good question because it doesn't actually specify in the document.
But the document is.
Until 2026. So we're inferring that it's by 2026.
Okay.
And
Follow on.
yes.
Do trips by e-cars count as a sustainable mode? And Sherry,
No.
did you want to answer that? Or what you already said the same answer?
The goal is around transit and active transportation,
Okay.
of which EVs are not.
So Sherry, do you want to speak up on that? Sherry's our office director for Darren and me.
Yeah, it's not included, but to get low carbon travel, there's a lot of kind of apps and things that are gonna be evolving, so you can see the menu of choices that even trip train in the future to get the lowest carbon trip to where you wanna go. So things like e-bikes, e-cars, will be part of those kinds of things in the future. But that doesn't relate to this active transportation.
Okay. Next, and then we'll do one in room, then I'm gonna go through the online.
Thank you for an awesome presentation. I have a kind of a question on what is our measure of success? And we talked about level of stress as a measure to determine if it's safe for people to use it. We also determine roadway success, still sometimes with level of service, but increasingly more with BMT.
Yeah.
Should we be looking at volume or should we be looking at bicycle miles traveled? As a lot of the trips that people do on bikes are very short.
Yeah.
While you might have a number of increase of daily riders, they're doing every trip on bike and probably increasing their miles traveled. Are we exploring how to measure success by distance traveled rather than just ridership?
We are looking. Oh, yes. The question was, are we looking into not just measuring trips by bicycle, but measuring miles traveled? And is that a better measure of success? Whether it's a better measure of success or not, our primary focus right now is trying to generate any sort of walking and bicycling data that we can. There's something called the National Streets Report to Congress that we just sent to Congress last year. And one of the big things we sort of highlighted as a huge obstacle to implementation in a lot of this is the extreme absence of walking bicycling data. And that's not just volume, that's things like where facilities are, crash data, what routes people take, all aspects of walking and bicycling data. We have a severe shortage relative to motor vehicles to transit. So whether miles traveled or trips or survey instruments like ACS or the National Household Travel Survey that's now shifting to an every 2-year collection, which is great. All of the, I think the answer is all of the above and more, because we have all of those things for other modes, and we need a full range of data to be able to gauge our success in getting more people riding. Getting more people riding safely, getting more people riding more often, longer distances, etc. We had a discussion with an outside agency about collecting e-bike data to get to some of these questions about e-bikes. Can we separate out, the safety effects of e-bikes? Very complicated questions, and part of the strategic agenda rewrite session that we'll be doing in the coming year is really focusing in on advancing the state of the walking and bicycling data collection and trying to build up those data sets. And I will put in a plug for Stephen Jesberger, who is our data guru. I don't know if he's here, but he left us with a handout. If you or your local government or state collects walking and bicycling volume data, he would love to put it into a national database we're building called TMAS, and come talk to me for more details.
We're actually over time, but I'm gonna ask another question. Does This affects all of us. Does vehicle size factor? Oh, wait, let me read this. Does vehicle size factor into design recommendations for bicycle facilities? While more rural areas have less traffic, they also have much larger vehicles moving at a higher speed.
Most design guides, they definitely factor in speed. Sometimes, the number of trucks on a roadway is the design factor, in sort of overall roadway design. Our bikeway design, I don't know if it explicitly calls out like what types of vehicles are running adjacent. It's largely the selection process is speed and volume, but that's certainly I think it's a good design consideration to think about.
Okay, technically we're over time, but do people want to stay a few seconds or?
Why don't we can mill around.
Okay, you can leave if you want to, but I'm gonna ask another question. I actually want to go to Alan's earlier question. Is there any FHWA or DOT planning guidance that says providing more than one type of bicycling accommodation along a road or corridor is a recommended or best practice to accommodate the full diversity of bike riding population?
Oh, that's a great question. I agree with that sentiment. I'm sorry, I'll reread the question. Is there any guidance that says providing, say, more than one bicycle facility type to accommodate sort of different user types and advisable practice? I don't know of anything within federal highway. I would certainly agree with the statement though. And that I'm gonna make a mental note of that.
Yeah, we better make a mental note really quick, because I'm working on the guidance now. And then Sherry, there was a Mount Vernon Trail question here. When is it gonna be widened? Steve, where's Steve? Steve, what is it about Vernon Trail gonna be
Somebody
widened?
asked when.
Ask the National Park Service, ask the National
That's
Park
not
Service
us.
when it's gonna be widened. I think technically we're over time, y'all. So Darren, closing words. Okay, any closing words before we go? All right, be safe, everybody. And support.